My name is Rowan Elridge, 29 years old. Dad's funeral was 2 days ago, and it played out exactly the way small-town funerals always do. Crying relatives in two stiff black clothes, uncomfortable metal folding chairs, scraping church floors, casseroles from neighbors who barely knew him but knew how to layer cream of mushroom soup over frozen peas. My older brother, Mark, stood at the podium and gave a touching eulogy about what a great man Dad was. He talked about Dad's work ethic, his terrible jokes, the way he used to burn pancakes on Sunday mornings. People laughed, dabbed at their eyes, nodded along like they were all remembering the same man. My younger sister, Chloe, sat in the front pew, sobbing daintily into a pack of tissues she'd probably bought specifically for the performance. She leaned into every sympathetic touch on her shoulder like it was oxygen. I sat in the back row and said nothing. Grief doesn't always look like tears. Sometimes it looks like staring at the same hymn book for 40 minutes and feeling nothing. Just a hollow numbness where something important used to live. The will reading was scheduled for today at 2 p.m. I showed up at Mr. Patterson's office 15 minutes early because I'm always early. Old habits from a teenage life of paying bills on time and never missing appointments. You don't get the luxury of being late when you're the one holding a family together. Dad's lawyer, Mr. Patterson, had represented him for 30 years. His office smelled like old paper and lemon polish, the kind of place where secrets go to sit in manila folders until someone dies. Mark and Chloe arrived together, laughing about something as they walked in, coats half-buttoned. They looked like people on their way to a brunch reservation, not to divide a dead man's life. Dad's estate was worth $847,000. I knew because he'd told me once, years ago, when we sat in the same office to discuss updating his power of attorney. Split 3 ways, it came to about $282,000 each. Enough to change your life if you're smart. Enough to disappear in a year if you're not. We sat around the polished mahogany table. Mr. Patterson adjusted his glasses, cleared his throat, and looked at me in a way that made my stomach twist. "Before we begin with the formal will," he said, "your father left specific instructions." He slid a sealed envelope across the table toward me. My name, Rowan, was written on the front in Dad's shaky handwriting. "He requested that you read this first," Mr. Patterson continued, alone. "That's not fair," Mark snapped immediately. "We should all hear it together." "Your father was very clear," Mr. Patterson said, tone firming. "This letter is for Rowan only." Chloe sniffed loudly. "Why does she get special treatment? We're all his kids." I looked at the envelope. My hands were already shaking. "Fine," I said. "Where can I go?" Mr. Patterson gestured down the hallway. "Small conference room on the left." I took the envelope and walked away, feeling their eyes burning holes in my back. The conference room was empty and too bright. The blinds were half closed, letting in slats of winter light. I sat down, stared at my name one more time, and tore the envelope open. Dad's letter was 3 pages long, handwritten, dated 2 weeks before he died. The first page started with something I hadn't thought about in years, but that lived under my skin like a scar. I was 16 when Mom died from cancer. Mark and Chloe were already in their 20s then, both living out of state with their own lives. They visited for the funeral, stayed 3 days, and left. I remember the morning after the funeral, Dad had written. "You were in pajamas, burning toast, trying to make us breakfast because your mother always had. I was so broken I could barely tell you the toaster was on fire." He wrote about how he stopped functioning, how the bills piled up, how he forgot to shop, to eat, to breathe properly, how he would have drowned in grief if someone hadn't grabbed him by the collar and dragged him back to the surface. "You were a child raising your parent," he wrote. "You learned to cook. You figured out how to pay the utilities with my checkbook when I left envelopes unopened on the table. You drove me to therapy appointments I complained about, sat in the parking lot doing homework while I pretended to hate being there. You held me when I cried at 3 in the morning because I woke up reaching for your mother and remembered she was gone." My throat tightened as I read. He mentioned Mark and Chloe once on that page. "Your siblings came for the funeral," he wrote. "They stayed long enough for the casseroles to run out. They never called to ask how either of us were doing." The second page was worse. It detailed debts I hadn't known about, all written in Dad's neat block letters. "Mark has had a gambling problem for 5 years," he wrote. "He promised me he'd stop every time I covered a new debt. I paid $43,000 in total. Money that should have been for my medical care, for repairs on the house, for your college. He never paid back a cent." My hands clenched around the paper. Chloe came to me with her big business idea, Dad continued. Everyone but me knew it was a scam. She asked for $28,000. I gave it to her because I wanted to believe in her. When it failed, she told me it was my fault for not giving her more. She hasn't spoken to me in 2 years. She didn't call on my birthday. She didn't call when I started chemo. I closed my eyes, remembering the empty phone on Dad's nightstand, how he used to stare at it like it might ring if he looked long enough. The third page made my stomach drop. 6 months ago, Dad wrote, they both came to see me, separately. He described how Mark had asked him to sign over the house early for tax reasons. How Chloe had come a week later with the same suggestion, dressed up in different words. They wanted to sell it immediately and split the profit, he wrote. Never mind that I was still living there, that I still needed a home, that you were still here, taking me to appointments and cooking my meals. The final paragraph was simple. You were there when it mattered, he wrote. You are the only one who loved me without wanting something in return. The house, the savings, the investments, it's all yours. Let them contest it if they want. Mr. Patterson has documentation of everything. My vision blurred. I read that paragraph 3 times, then a fourth. Not because I didn't understand it, but because I did, and it felt too big to fit inside my chest. My phone buzzed on the table, a text from Mark. What's taking so long? We're all waiting. Of course they were. I folded the letter, slid it back into the envelope, and tucked it deep into my purse, like it was something fragile that might break if I let anyone else see it. When I walked back into the main office, the energy shifted. Mark and Chloe both looked annoyed, arms crossed, legs jiggling. Mr. Patterson looked sympathetic, which somehow made it worse. Well? Chloe demanded. What did it say? It said Dad changed his will, I replied. Changed it how? Mark asked, leaning forward. I sat down. My voice didn't shake this time. Let's let Mr. Patterson explain. He cleared his throat, pulled out the official document, and began. Your father, Robert Henderson, being of sound mind, hereby leaves his entire estate to... The conference room door burst open so hard it rattled against the wall. A woman I'd never seen before stepped inside, clutching a thick folder and wearing a professional smile that didn't reach her eyes. I'm so sorry to interrupt, she said, not sounding sorry at all. But I'm Victoria Reeves, and I'm here regarding Robert's other children. The room went silent. His what? I heard myself ask. She looked at me, then at my brother and sister. I represent your half-siblings, she said. There are 4 of them. They're contesting this will, and they have documentation proving they're entitled to a share of your father's estate. For a second, nobody moved. The clock on the wall seemed suddenly loud, ticking over the shock. Mr. Patterson was the first to react. He stood up so fast his chair slid back. This is a private meeting, he said, his voice suddenly sharp. You have no right to barge in here, Ms. Reeves. Victoria didn't flinch. She stepped fully into the room, closing the door behind her with the easy confidence of someone who's interrupted things before and gotten away with it. I have every right, she replied. My clients are legal heirs to Robert Henderson's estate, and they were deliberately excluded from this will. My brother recovered next. What do you mean, other children? He demanded. Dad didn't have other kids. Victoria's lips curved into something that wasn't quite a smile. I represent 4 individuals who share your father's DNA. They have documentation, and they're prepared to contest any will that fails to recognize them. Chloe let out an incredulous snort. So what? You want us to hand over a few $1,000 to some random strangers who suddenly realized they might be related to a man with an obituary and a house? They're not strangers, Victoria said calmly. They are your family. They're nothing, Mark snapped. If they exist at all, Dad clearly didn't want them involved. He didn't even know them. That was when I noticed the way Mr. Patterson was watching all of this, somewhere between resignation and fatigue, like he'd rehearsed this scene in his mind 100 times. How long have you known? I asked him quietly. He sighed, took off his glasses, and rubbed the bridge of his nose. Your father told me about them 5 years ago, he said, when he updated his will after his first cancer diagnosis. I stared at him. And you didn't think that was worth mentioning before now? It was Robert's story to tell, he said simply, not mine. Victoria lifted her folder. Your father admitted to having affairs outside his marriage. Those affairs produced children. 4 that we know of. They are entitled to a share of his assets. The law is very clear about biological heirs. Mr. Patterson finally sat back down, opened a different file, thicker than the will itself, and slid it onto the table. Then, he said, let's talk about biological facts, shall we? He flipped open the folder. Your first client, Trevor Haynes, he began, looking directly at Victoria, claims Robert is his father. The alleged affair occurred in 1979. Victoria nodded. That's correct. Mr. Patterson pulled out a stapled document and laid it in front of her. Robert was deployed overseas with the National Guard for the entire window of Trevor's conception. Here are his military records from that year. Would you like a copy for your files? Victoria's expression flickered. Your second client, Whitney Torres, he continued, claims her mother had a relationship with Robert in 1982. She requested a genetic test when she first contacted him. He slid over another document. It came back negative. Robert is not her biological father. Mark leaned forward. So two of them aren't even related to Dad? Correct, Mr. Patterson said. Trevor and Whitney have no legal connection to Robert Henderson whatsoever. I felt a strange mix of anger and numb amusement. People I'd never met, showing up to claim a dead man who never belonged to them. And the other two? I asked quietly. Mr. Patterson's face softened a fraction. Natalie Henderson and Christopher Blake, he said. Both are Robert's biological children from brief relationships during a 6-month separation from your mother in 1977. Chloe's mouth dropped open. Mom never said... She didn't know at first, Mr. Patterson said. When she found out, she chose to stay with Robert. They went through counseling, worked on their marriage. He turned back to Victoria. Robert paid child support to both mothers until Natalie and Christopher turned 18. He fulfilled every legal obligation. He attempted to maintain contact. The mothers chose otherwise. I swallowed. Did he ever try to see them? Like, actually be in their lives? Mr. Patterson nodded slowly. He tried. Natalie's mother moved her to Oregon when she was 3. She made it clear he wasn't welcome beyond the checks. Christopher's mother remarried when he was 5. Her new husband adopted Christopher. Robert respected their wishes, but continued paying support even after he wasn't legally required to. Victoria cleared her throat. Regardless of the circumstances, they are his children. He abandoned them. This will is punitive and biased against them. Mr. Patterson's gaze hardened. Your clients did not reach out during their childhood, he said. They did not attempt contact when they turned 18. 3 of the 4 only appeared 6 months ago when the local paper ran an article about Robert's illness and his 40 years at the plant. Coincidentally, that article also mentioned his approximate net worth. My mind rewound. I remembered that article. The pride in Dad's voice when he'd said, they wanted to write about us. Can you believe that? They weren't calling to say goodbye, I murmured. They were calling to check on the will. No one answered that. Victoria straightened her shoulders. The law doesn't care about who called when, she said. It cares about biological facts and fair distribution of assets. And your clients want 20% each, my sister said slowly, doing the math out loud. That's 80% of our father's estate to people who've spent, what? A combined 15 hours with him their whole lives? They're not strangers, Victoria said again. They're family. They're not our family, Mark snapped. They're opportunists. Dad didn't owe them anything after they turned 18. I realized everyone was speaking for Dad except me, the girl who'd been there when he could barely stand, the one who'd read the truth in his handwriting half an hour ago. What happens if they contest the will? I asked Mr. Patterson. He opened another tab in the file, revealing a highlighted paragraph. Your father included an in terrorem clause, he said. It states that anyone who contests the will and loses forfeits any right to inheritance, including through other legal channels. It's designed to deter frivolous challenges. Is this frivolous? I asked. Patterson looked from me to Victoria and back again. It's weak, he said. Emotionally compelling, perhaps. Legally, very weak. But Ms. Reeves might still choose to file. Sometimes pressure and the threat of legal fees are enough to scare beneficiaries into quick settlements. Victoria's jaw tightened. My clients are not bullies. No, I said quietly. They're scavengers. There's a difference. Her eyes snapped to mine. You have no idea what their lives have been like. Growing up without a father, knowing he chose another family over them. I cut her off. No, I have no idea what their lives were like. Just like they have no idea what it was like to be 16, holding Dad while he cried himself hoarse because Mom was dead and his other kids never called. We're not going to play Trauma Olympics, Ms. Reeves. We're here about a will. The room went quiet. Mr. Patterson cleared his throat. Regardless, he said, the will is clear. Robert chose to leave everything to Rowan. Your brother and sister only inherit if she decides to share. Both of them turned to look at me then. Mark's expression was disbelief edged with panic. Chloe's was wounded, like I'd personally betrayed her by hearing Dad's truth. You're not actually considering cutting us out, Mark said, right? I looked at him. at the man who'd pressured a dying father to sign over his house, at the boy who'd left home after 3 days and never came back when grief got ugly. I'm considering honoring Dad's wishes, I replied. Victoria gathered her folder. I'll speak with my clients, she said finally. We will decide whether to proceed with a formal contest. You do that, Mr. Patterson said, his tone gone cool. But do not interrupt my meetings again without an appointment. She left, heels sharp against the hallway tile. The door clicked shut behind her, leaving the three of us in a silence that felt heavier than anything she'd brought in. What the hell just happened? Mark muttered. What happened, Mr. Patterson said slowly, is that some people saw an obituary and smelled money. And your father fully expected that. That is why he prepared so thoroughly. He turned to me. The will stands as written unless successfully contested. Right now, everything is legally yours, Rowan. The question is, what do you want to do? I thought about the letter in my purse, about 16-year-old me learning to cook casseroles and write checks, about Dad crying at 3 a.m., apologizing to Mom for still being alive, about the way Mark and Chloe had breezed into his sick room 6 months ago, more interested in house deeds than in his breathing. For a moment, the old version of me, the one trained to keep the peace at any cost, whispered, "Split it. Avoid the fight. Don't make enemies." But Dad hadn't spent his last good days writing apologies and explanations so I could throw them away just to avoid an argument. I want to honor Dad's wishes, I said finally. All of them. Chloe's face drained of color. What does that mean? It means, I said, my voice steady, we fight this, all of it. Mark's face went red so quickly it was like someone flipped a switch. Chloe blinked at me, stunned, as if my words had rearranged the oxygen in the room. You're cutting us out? Mark demanded. You're cutting yourselves out, I said evenly. They stared at me like I had betrayed them, when the truth was far simpler. They were only shocked because for the first time in our shared history, I wasn't willing to be the quiet background character in my own life. Mr. Patterson cleared his throat, breaking the tense silence. Before we move forward, he said, there is something else your father instructed me to share, but only if Rowan chose to honor the will exactly as written. He reached into his briefcase and pulled out another envelope. My name was written on the front in Dad's handwriting, but underneath it, in smaller letters, were the words, "Open only if she refuses to share." My chest tightened. I opened it slowly, expecting maybe a paragraph. It was a single page, one page that somehow weighed more than the first 3 combined. I knew you'd do the right thing, Dad had written at the top. I knew because you always have, even when it cost you. The words blurred as I continued reading. He explained everything with painful clarity, how he'd set up the estate, how the house was fully paid off and worth far more than I realized, how the savings account wasn't just savings, it was an investment portfolio he'd begun when I was born, how the life insurance payout was structured specifically to provide income for me long-term. Then came the part that made my breath hitch. You gave up college to take care of me. You gave up being a kid to keep this family alive. This money is meant to give you back what you lost. Not to reward you, but to restore you, to give you the future you should have had at 23, not the one grief forced you into at 16. My hands shook as I read the final paragraph. Please don't give it away to people who will waste it. You were the only one who loved me without wanting anything in return. Let me love you back in the only way I can now. When I lowered the letter, Mark and Chloe were watching me with expressions I couldn't read. Anger, maybe, or fear, or disbelief. What did he say? Chloe asked softly. Enough, I said, folding the letter. Enough to make this very clear. Mark scoffed. So you're just keeping all of it, just like that? You weren't there, I said quietly. Not when it mattered. He stood abruptly, chair scraping against hardwood. You're unbelievable. And you're predictable, I replied, surprising even myself. Dad gave you thousands, and you used it to gamble away your marriage and your future. Chloe used hers to throw at a scam and blame everyone but herself. Neither of you were here when Dad needed you, and now you think you deserve what he left me? Chloe's voice cracked. We're your family. So was Dad, I said, and you treated him like an ATM. She pressed a trembling hand to her mouth. Mark opened his to argue again, but Mr. Patterson beat him to it. Your father documented every debt, every loan, every broken promise, he said. I have receipts for all of it. If you contest the will, we'll present every detail in open court. That silenced them. And then, with one last look at me, hurt, furious, or maybe just shocked, they left. No dramatic slam of the door, just the quiet, soft click of people who still believed they had options. I sat down slowly, the weight of everything settling over me like a heavy blanket. Mr. Patterson exhaled. That took courage. That took Dad's words, I answered softly, and years of being quiet. He nodded. Then you should know something else. He slid a thick envelope across the table. The formal contest. Filed by Victoria Reeves. Filed on behalf of all 4 supposed heirs. Filed within hours of her dramatic exit. I felt the fury bloom slow and deep in my chest. They didn't wait long, I murmured. No, Mr. Patterson said. They expected you to settle. People like Ms. Reeves prey on fear. Fear of conflict, fear of legal fees, fear of being the bad guy. But your father built his case carefully. He anticipated every angle. What happens now? I asked. We respond, he said simply, and we win. The next weeks unfolded like a surreal legal chess match. Victoria filed. We counterfiled. She attempted emotional framing. We replied with documented truth. Dad's meticulous records became our ammunition. Every child support check, every denied attempt at contact, every loan to my siblings, every medical bill paid, every instance of abandonment. It was like seeing my life, and his, laid out in numbered exhibits. On the 7th day after the contest filing, my brother's wife called. She never called me. Her voice was tight, frayed. I know you're not interested in talking to any of us right now, she said, but I need to tell you something. What is it? It's Mark, she whispered. His gambling. It's not under control. He took out a second mortgage on our house. I only found out when the bank called. He thinks your father's money will fix everything. It won't, I said. I know, she choked out. That's why I'm calling. If you give him money, it'll destroy us. He'll lose everything. I'll lose everything. I'm begging you, don't enable him. Please. The pain in her voice was real. I closed my eyes. I'm sorry, I said, but I've already made my decision. Good, she whispered. Thank you. She hung up before I could say anything else. Chloe called 3 days later. She cried, apologized, said she'd been selfish, said she was scared, said she didn't know how to fix what she'd done. I listened, but I didn't bend. Some things break because they were never built well to begin with. A week later, Victoria sent a settlement proposal, $50,000 total, $12,500 for each half-sibling. It's a goodwill offer, she claimed, a chance to end this without further stress. I read it, folded it, placed it gently on the table. No, I told Mr. Patterson. Dad said they don't deserve anything, and he was right. He nodded. Then we decline. We did. Victoria responded within hours, confirming what we already knew. This was going to court. The preliminary hearing was set. Date, 3 weeks out. Place, County Courthouse, Courtroom 2B. And on that morning, I walked toward the courthouse holding both of Dad's letters in my bag. The first one explaining the truth, and the second one giving me the strength to fight for it. I didn't know what would happen next, but for the first time in my life, I wasn't afraid of choosing myself. The courthouse halls smelled like floor polish and paper, sterile, echoing, the kind of place where families come to tear themselves apart or stitch themselves back together. I arrived early, clutching a coffee I barely sipped and Dad's 2 letters tucked neatly into my bag like armor. By 9:00 a.m., everyone was in their designated corners. To my left, Natalie and Christopher, the 2 biological half-siblings who actually had some connection to Dad, thin, pale, exhausted looking. Natalie kept smoothing her skirt. Christopher kept cracking his knuckles. To my right, Mark and Chloe, my siblings by blood and history, both wearing the same expression, fear disguised as righteous indignation. In the center row, Victoria Reeves, their lawyer, a portfolio stacked on her lap like a weapon. Mr. Patterson stood beside me, posture straight, face calm. He whispered, "You're ready for this," and I realized I was. Judge Brennan entered, a woman in her 60s with steel gray hair and the tired patience of someone who'd seen every kind of family disaster imaginable. We rose, we sat, and then it began. Victoria spoke first, painting a picture of abandoned children, emotional wounds, unfair favoritism, and the moral responsibility to treat all biological heirs equally. It was a beautiful speech, dramatic, poetic, completely disconnected from actual reality. Then Mr. Patterson rose, and reality re-entered the room like a tidal wave. He laid out everything with surgical precision. Dad's legally documented attempts to be involved, child support records, letters from Oregon neighbors who remembered Dad showing up when Natalie's mother refused to let him inside, adoption documentation for Christopher, the fact that both half-siblings never reached out until a newspaper article revealed Dad's illness and estimated net worth. He didn't raise his voice once. He didn't insult anyone. He just told the truth with such sharp clarity it made the air crackle. Finally, he slid forward an exhibit binder labeled Loans, Debts, and Abandonment. Pages documenting Mark's $43,000 of gambling debts Dad paid, Chloe's $28,000 business bailout, their near-complete absence during Dad's final years, their attempt to get him to sign over the house while he was still alive. The room felt colder as he continued. "This is not a case of a parent neglecting his children," Mr. Patterson said softly. "This is a case of adult children exploiting their parent until the very end, and beyond." Even Judge Brennan lifted her eyebrows at that. Then she turned to me. "Ms. Elridge," she asked, "do you wish to speak?" My heartbeat stumbled. I hadn't planned to. But something in her tone, gentle, steady, invited honesty. I stood. "My father wasn't perfect," I said. "He made mistakes, but he tried. He tried to love his children, all of them. He tried to help even when it cost him. And when he was dying, when the house was too quiet and everything hurt, I was there." I swallowed hard. I cooked. I paid bills. I took him to appointments. I held him when he cried at 3 a.m. because he missed my mom. I gave up school. I gave up being a kid. I didn't ask for thanks. I didn't ask for money. I didn't ask for anything except that he stay alive for one more day. Natalie looked down. Christopher wiped his eyes. "My siblings here," I said, gesturing at Mark and Chloe, "made their own choices. And my half-siblings had decades to reach out. They chose not to. The will isn't about punishing them. It's about honoring who showed up." The room was silent when I finished. Judge Brennan nodded once, slowly, then closed the file. "The law is clear," she said. "A parent may distribute their assets however they choose, so long as they were competent at signing. In this case, Robert Henderson's intentions were explicit and well documented." She turned toward the opposing side. "The will stands, contest dismissed." Her gavel hit the block. A single sound, a final sound, the end of something long and painful. Afterward, everything happened in a blur. Natalie and Christopher left quietly, eyes down, their lawyer chasing after them. Mark didn't look at me at all. He stormed out, jaw clenched, his wife following behind him with their children. I caught her eye for just a second. She mouthed, "Thank you," and I knew she meant it. Chloe lingered. For a moment, I thought she might say something meaningful, something sincere. Instead, she said, "Dad always loved you best." "No," I said gently. "He just loved you in ways you didn't know how to receive." She didn't respond. She simply left. Mr. Patterson squeezed my shoulder. "It's over," he said. But I knew better. Legally, yes. Emotionally? That would take time. The estate released funds to me after 30 days. $723,000 after taxes, fees, and adjustments. Dad's house became mine, our home. Solid, quiet, familiar. I didn't throw a party. I didn't take a vacation. I didn't buy a flashy car. I did something Dad would have been proud of. I enrolled in nursing school. The career I'd put on hold at 16 was finally possible again. For the first time in my life, the future felt like something I could shape instead of just survive. Years passed. Not in cinematic montage style, but in real time, with all its uneven edges. I graduated nursing school, got a job at the same hospital where Dad spent his final days, bought new bookshelves for his old study, painted the guest room a soft sage green, planted a garden in the backyard he never had the strength to start. Mark eventually joined Gamblers Anonymous. It took a divorce to get him there, but recovery is recovery. We talk now. Carefully. Slowly. Chloe rebuilt her life too, got a real job, found a partner who didn't drain her bank account, sent me a letter on the anniversary of Dad's death, not asking for forgiveness, just acknowledging she'd grown. That was enough. Natalie sent a Facebook friend request once. I declined. Not because I hated her, but because I didn't owe her access to my life. Christopher never contacted me again. Maybe that was best. 5 years after Dad died, I got married in the backyard of the house he left me. String lights hung from the trees. My husband, kind, steady, endlessly patient, held my hands as we exchanged vows beneath the same sky Dad used to stare at from the porch. Mark stood beside me as a groomsman. He looked healthier, softer, present. Chloe read a short poem about family and forgiveness. When the toasts began, Mark raised his glass with trembling hands. "To my little sister," he said, voice thick, "who saved this family more times than we deserved, who took care of Dad when we weren't there, who honored his wishes with more courage than we ever showed, who deserved every penny she got, and every happiness she's found. Chloe raised her glass next. To the sister who inherited Dad's house and Dad's strength, thank you for choosing honesty over comfort, integrity over fear. I cried then, not elegant movie tears, but ugly, shaking sobs that blurred the lights and made the world soft around the edges. Because they weren't celebrating the money. They were celebrating me, something I never thought I'd live to see. Today, I'm a nurse, a wife, a homeowner, a woman who finally built the life she lost at 16. Dad's money didn't fix everything. It didn't erase the grief. It didn't mend every broken relationship. But it did something far more valuable. It gave me a second chance at the life I almost missed. It told me, without question, that I mattered. That being there when it mattered, mattered. And that, more than anything, was the real inheritance.